All right. So, Brian, what are we talking about?
So we're talking about a new feature that we've been working on. It's mentions in the Hey menu, where we would separate those out into a section of their own, highlight them to sort of help you see the important stuff and pull out stuff that's more important than all the other stuff in your Hey menu. And
Right.
so we've been working on it for a while. We've tried it internally. We have a version that's ready to go with these two separate sections, and Andy can show those two separate sections. And Jay-Z gave feedback, here as we're getting like close to ready to release this, of, just after he had just tried it on our own account, feeling like the two sections were a little confusing in regards to like don't forget, and just feeling like now there's these like three sections, and sometimes you have new for you, and don't forget kind of moves around. You're kind of used to, the section at the top you pay attention to because it's new, and the section below it you kind of ignore because it's don't forget. But now there's a section below mentions that is also new that you shouldn't ignore because it's new. So now it's kind of like disorienting a little bit to people who are used to it how it is. And in the process, just suggested like, well, what if we just kept only one section and just grouped the mentions at the top of that section instead of having two separate sections? Like, would that get us pretty far with a little bit less of this complications? But that has some trade-offs as well. So that's the basics. Andy, do you want to like just show the options that we're talking about?
Yeah, sure. Y'all can see my screen?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, so this left version is the sort of the version that we have ready to go right now. So we used to have just this one, but we're just adding this one over here. So it seemed pretty straightforward. You get the advantages of like being able to clear these sections separately, which you're thinking could be nice, because part of the goal of this was just trying to help people like focus on stuff that matters, clear away the noise. So if we're saying that like mentions are the thing that are probably not noise but signal, then this other stuff might be the stuff you want to like clear out all at once. So that kind of just was an easy way to like get all that sorted, with the, of course, downsides that Brian just mentioned. So the proposed version is something kind of like this, where you still have just one new for you section like we do now. You still have one mark all as red button like we do now. The only difference is that you somehow call out the mentions and sort them to the top. So I think originally we were thinking that it might be weird to have like these sorted this whole list isn't sorted chronologically anymore. So you can see that this is the most recent one, was sent at 5, but we have one at 4:30 that's above it. In fact, there's also one at 2 o'clock that's sort of above it, because these are sort of internally sorted by time. So there's like two different lists basically. I don't like, whenever I just look at this, I don't like really think too much about it. I think mostly because I don't ever like personally look at the timestamp to decide what I'm going to look at. I just go here and like, oh, there's mentions, I'm going to take care of those first. And, you generally get a sense that stuff within the sections are ordered chronologically, but I don't like rely on it to choose what to look at usually. So that part didn't bother me a whole lot. I think I think it looks nicer. It just, having 3 sections, it's easier to grep. And then these are called out, so they seem like very much like, pay attention to these. So I like all that. I think the main drawback for me right now is just the mark all as red works like it just like it does now. So, which isn't a bad thing, because like obviously that'll still work the same. But I think part of the advantage of this is being able to clear them separately. So I don't know if that's like a big deal though. I don't know if y'all have any thoughts on that.
And then the third version is basically just a dotted line or light line dividing versus the.
Yeah, I was just trying to say if there's a way we can just sort of make these feel a little bit more like 2 separate lists, instead of like these just happen to be like highlighted and they happen to be at the top.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is any better or not, but I was just sort of playing around with it. If we wanted to figure out a way to have something like this, but only mark the sort of other activity as red, we could do something like this, where we say like mark all these below as red. Feels a little bit funny to me, but because I would assume that most of the time you're not actually going to want to like clear out all of your mentions. Usually want to respond to them. So again, just trying it out. I don't know if I actually like that all that much, but
let's go back to the current version.
cool.
So yeah, this actually is like, of course, we're looking at this in was this Figma, but production version looks like this, right? Currently,
Yes.
Yeah. So the concern about having like 3 sections. So is that the primary concern, or is it that this is of course Jay-Z's feedback. When we say concern, it's not like we haven't shipped this to customers, we don't know. Is that the primary concern, or is it that you might miss new activity if you had a bunch of new mentions at the top, which would exist in all the different designs, right? So if we're still pushing, if these still bubble to the top, we still are left with all the other concerns that we could have. So I want to tease out the concerns, because if the primary issue is you could have a bunch of mentions that are stale and the new stuff comes in below it and you don't see that, none of these designs are different in that respect.
Right, that's true.
Right. Okay, so let's tease out, the best way to do this is tease out the concerns. So this feeling that there's multiple sections, is that a what do you guys think? Is that a big deal? Is it like really matter? Is it actually more useful that there's multiple sections because it does differentiate these things? How do you guys feel about it?
Yeah, from my perspective, I mean, it's kind of, that part alone doesn't resonate a huge amount for me, because I think, like, first, I think it's primarily people that are heavily used to it working a certain way, which is certainly a consideration, but it's not like the defining consideration. And then it also is tied heavily to at least in his specific example, it's tied heavily to like don't forget, and how that section iterates with these other sections, and like not everybody uses don't forget, and so like I feel like you'd have to be like very used to the product, use don't forget, and find the sections disorienting for that to be the thing. But in the great way that JC does, I mean, part of it was also just, I mean, so to me, that tension for him, again, sorry to speak for JC, but I think that tension for him led to just like, can we have less change, less UI, but deliver essentially the same value? Was kind of, I think, what he was just like, is there a simpler way? We don't have these like sections, we don't have 2 mark as red buttons, like it's just less stuff going on, but it still gives us the same. If we just want to prioritize the mentions, can we do that without that? And also he is talking from experience from like how the mobile option did work before, where you could turn it on, and you could, my understanding is that all it did was sort them to the top. Like it didn't really do anything else. It just put them at the top.
Right.
Which I never actually experienced that feature. So I don't have that experience.
Previous thing. I mean, there's so if we're trying to get them to the top, let's just say we think that bubbling them up to the top or floating them up to the top is where the primary value is here. I would kind of agree that the middle one is probably like the maybe the middle or the third one, let's just say, with the divider, are probably enough. Like that's the primary thing. The mark all is red piece. While I agree with you, Andy, like it could be irritating that you can't just, I don't know if it matters enough to like warrant an entire new section and all the stuff that comes with that. Maybe though, I don't know. Like I'm undecided at the moment, but I'm just talking it through. Like the least effective difference here is to basically say, and I always think about this in terms of like, how would we announce this feature? That would be like, hey, if someone's trying to get a hold of you and they at mention you, this just bubbles to the top of your new for you. Like there's a very simple explanation. We can just say it just bubbles to the top and we highlight it so you can spot it. Or we put a little divider and just so those, stay at the top or whatever. Like you can kind of explain that. And that explanation would work for all these designs. So if we could get away with the explanation, which we would, which is what's happening, do we also need the section name and the separate mark all is red? It's almost like 2 additional features that are sort of above and beyond the basic thing we're doing here, which is to make sure that at mentions are like more important, let's say. Like, I think we can get away with that without adding the other elements. So I think that's the root of it. The highlighting versus the divider. I think it's kind of interesting to have them highlighted, but I don't know. I almost wonder if that's too much. What do you think? And by the way, I'm not even suggesting that we throw away what we have right now. Just out of these, the ones without the separate section, which one speaks to you more? And by the way, are there ways to highlight it? Like, we could just bold the word "mentioned you." We don't need
or put a little background color around that or something.
Well, why don't you want to try that live? Actually, I mean, you want to just like on the right, it maybe duplicate this, make another one, or whatever, or just whatever you can do, and get rid of the divider line, and then just bold the word "mentioned you." Yeah, or mentioned, or mentioned you is probably good. We could do that, right? Which is again, like, kind of least effective difference here. Again, just bold. Is that enough to call this out? These seem to be more important. We bubbled in the top, and they're treated differently, but they're not yelling or not really boasting that they're that different, but they are different enough. I'm also just riffing here. I kind of agree with you. I never look at the timestamps, but I wonder if there's an implicit, well, not wonder, you kind of assume there's an implicit order here that is, if you think about any inbox situation, like the most recent stuff tends to be at the top. So we have that conflict no matter what.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, I mean, I guess this is this is technically a problem with either, whether there's a section or not, but like the reason that not a single section, the reason that never really made the pass when I was pitching it in the first place was just was I was really hung up on the date ordering part of it, and just just kind of like, well, that's just in my mind that I was just like, that's just not an option. Like, you can't have one section with different date sorts inside it, but here's an example where I think it does get worse in a single section situation. Is people have all sorts of different kinds of accounts, and so like, if you've been away for a few days, or not, that's a bad example. If you're just like, if you're really busy, you got mentioned 10 times or whatever, the thought of like, so like if you're not counting your mentions, like say you just have a red dot, I have new stuff, like you haven't cleared all your new stuff, you have your new stuff. And so like you have, 10 mentions at the top, and you're just like, oh, new stuff, until you check it, and it's just like new stuff is coming up. I guess really this is a problem with both of them. Like new stuff is happening down here below, and you're opening up with these like 10 mentions that you've been kind of like saving for later or whatever. And like, do you actually know that there's like, oh, there's like new stuff coming in all the time, like down here, that you're just like, oh, nothing new for me, the mentions are at the top. So I think it's a potential problem with both of them. I do think it's a little bit worse with the single section because, it's just one date order. And so it's like, oh, if I open that menu, I think I would assume, oh, there's nothing new for me because there's nothing above those mentions yet,
I agree that I think when you combine them into a single section, an expectation is sort of broken, and that's probably not a good thing. Here's another approach. We keep a single new for you section, and we just highlight mentions within that section. We don't need to group them at all. Don't need to bubble them at the top. Like, if you look at this highlighted yellow one, Andy, whatever you can, just like if the second one was fourth, whatever, right? You'd spot it. This is a mention, it's important. And it would just be highlighted. We'd be like, hey, menu's the same, but we know that at mentions can be more important than other things because someone's directly referring to you. So we've just made it a bit easier to spot those by highlighting those yellow in your new for you menu. Right. And then like we solve we sort of solve it all. Date order remains, single section remains. We don't get the mark only certain things as red, but we're not treating them in a way where you'd expect that anymore, in a sense.
Right. Yeah.
And we're saying like, well, we're making it easier to see. And if you open your menu and there's and there's 9 things, and 4 of them are highlighted, or 3 or 2, like you're going to spot those just as easily as if they were at the top. You're going to see them in the same way. In fact, you might even see them more because they're not orderly anymore. It's like this disorder, but there's a stripe of a couple things that are striped and highlighted. So you might get the exact same effect. It might actually be more potent, and it's also perfectly predictable in terms of timestamps. So I currently think that might be the best solution. So we're also not adding any additional structure. So there's no dividers.
Yeah, that's nice.
None of that. We just decide that @mentions are highlighted, and the highlight could be this color. It could be even fainter. It could be something else. I think this is actually quite nice. It's kind of a nice thing. We used to, this might be a throwback to Basecamp Classic. To-dos that were assigned to you way back in like 2006 or 5 or whatever, 4, were always highlighted yellow in to-do lists. It was just like, if it's assigned to you, it's just highlighted yellow when you looked at it. So there's something about that I think is nice.
Yeah, it seems same kind of idea here.
Yeah. Why don't you just, maybe it's too much of a hassle to do live, but if you could actually create space between those 2 that are highlighted, could you move one down?
Yeah, here.
Just so we can kind of move that off and bring it back.
I'll just make these 2. And then
yeah, fine, right. Yeah, I mean, imagine opening that, you're gonna go, okay, 2 people mentioned me. Like, I got that. Grouping them wouldn't have made it any better, actually. And I think to Brian's, well, actually, I don't even know who originally said it, but the dates are all online. The stamps are all online. Everything just works.
Yeah.
I also find that like solutions like this are actually very satisfying in a sense. Like it's kind of a good room. I don't know if this is the right one. I think this could be the right one, the right approach to this, given all the different trade-offs we've talked about. There's something kind of nice about the fact that in the end, all we had to do was add a class to @mentions. Like there's something about like this could have been a 1-hour project. It's even though you're like at the end, you're like, it could have been a 1-hour project. There's something nice about returning back to that and reminding ourselves that like, what is it, just kind of a good jolt, like what is the simplest way to do some of these things, and starting there could be nice. But sometimes you have to end up here. You can't start here. You end up here, even though you could have started here, but you just like couldn't have actually. I don't, Brian, what's your take, or Andy, what do you guys think about this approach? Or what are the downsides?
Yeah, I think the only I think like you mentioned, the fact that they're not like all stuck together isn't like super important in terms of just like open the menu and seeing like important stuff. So I feel like that's fine. Yeah, I think the only like real benefit of this one in that case is just being able to like clear off all those, so you're just left with those. But again, that's not like the core reason why we even started this project, even though that does seem like it could be really nice.
Well, we could, if so, what I like about this is we can layer this. So like we could ship it this way. The only change we're making is we highlight @mentions, right? So that's like already a win in a sense, if @mentions matter. The other thing we could ultimately do if we wanted to do later, unnecessary, but later, is we could have 2 mark all as red options in the top right corner. It'd be like mark @mentions as red, mark everything else as red, or something. Like you could still do that, even though they're not grouped. So we could do that if we felt like that was important. And I always find that when you think about it that way, it kind of refocuses you on like, would that be actually a good thing at all? Like if we had 2 options up there now in this on a single inline line, would that feel confusing and weird? And if it would, it maybe wouldn't have worked separated out either. Like it just was kind of unnecessary, but I don't know. I think it also could be one of these things where the primary objective here was just to make these more obvious.
Yeah.
That's where this started. And it wasn't about marking them as red or marking others as red. It was just like, make these more obvious, I think, right? Was that essentially?
Yeah, I mean, the mark all red, mostly was, a bonus of the solution, and just like, oh, that would be really nice. Especially in those cases where you've been away for a little while and you've just like, you skim through all the other stuff and you're just like, okay, clear that out. Now I'm left with the important stuff. So I think it's a nice thing, but I don't think it was, I don't think it's part of the epicenter necessarily. The highlighting, like this solution came to me as well, as far as like, oh, maybe we just highlight them. Yeah, because Jay-Z was talking about it. He was like, oh, like in Campfire, where like, mentions are just, they just look different when you're scrolling through, Campfire. And so yeah, at that point I was like, oh well, gosh, what if we just, what if that was just kind of the same thing that was happening here? So I do see that. Plus, I mean, and I'd say the main reason, I think the main case for this is like a little bit less helpful is just a really full hey menu, where it's just like, I mean, there's just like a lot of stuff. So yes, you can scroll through and like the mentions are called out a little bit, but I just feel like when it's a lot of stuff, it'd be nice if they were grouped together. But yeah, certainly as far as like, smallest change gets us a step closer to what we're trying to do, gives us plenty of room to iterate if we're unhappy with it later without, causing a lot of like moving pieces and adding extra complication.
Yeah,
lot to like with this. There's
like this step here where if we started here, we could always end up now with the separate sections. So let's just say like we ended up deciding that we want to do that later. It'd be weird to pull back in a sense. So it's like gives us more optionality to start here. I think first of all, clearing things is not that hard, right? You hover over the number and you get an X. Like it's not like it's multiple clicks. You just, per thing, you can do that pretty fast if you needed to. You can mark all as red. We could ultimately allow you to have just mark mentions as red or just mark everything as red, keep whatever those options could be. We could do that. There probably are other things we could do here. Like there could be an option that if you have, another way to think about this, I don't like this option right now because it's conditional, but there could be an option if you had multiple at mentions next to mark all as red that would say like group at mentions or something like that. And if you hit that, then they just float to the top and then you did it yourself. And so you're in a mode now where, but then we have to maintain modes in two different designs, which is probably not necessary. It's certainly not necessary. The other thing I like about just the highlighting things is that, and this is more of a general feel, it's just less fussy than having multiple sections that come and go and have their own controls and all that stuff. As much as, by the way, I do like what's on production when I used it last week. I think I would feel just as good about this. And it's just simpler. It's just simpler, and it's just, there's something like, it's simpler and basically equally effective. Like, and doesn't have the side effects of like, there's something new that came in and I missed it. I mean, because that is a pretty big downside actually of the grouping of the groups, as we've known sort of from the early iterations of this. So yeah, my vote would be, not that we're voting, just my feel. If I was voting, I think the highlighted, wherever they land, highlight those.
Yeah, and I guess now that I'm thinking about it, like in some ways, like keeping them in a chronological list like this and highlighting them, like tells you something different. Because if this, if someone like mentioned you like 6 hours ago, like that's something that's like a little bit harder to like piece together from this.
It's actually a really good point too.
Yeah,
I think that's a really, really good point. The other thing we can do, by the way, and is we can even just dial back on the highlighting again. Like what if we reversed, or it said mentioned you, reverse that out as a pill of some sort. So,
right. So
mentioned you was yellow or something, bright yellow or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's still black or green and white, whatever you want to do. That would also be enough to really call that out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what would be nice about that, frankly, is when you, well, yeah, treating it almost more like a boost pill. Not quite, I guess. But when you mention someone, their avatar's in there and you kind of their name is next to it, and there's just like this, it has this sense of being an object, like its own object in line wherever it appears. So maybe this yellow highlight is actually too much still, and just reversing out mentioned you as a pill would do the job. I mean, you could mock that up now, or we can just look at it another time.
Yeah, like this is sort of like this idea, except we just make the. I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
like throw a black oval behind that, like a radius box, and then just make the text white or something, right? And then we can just like, it might not be.
There's actually maybe there's a bunch of
that might be hard here. Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I get what you're saying.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, there is an element about the yellow background that sort of looks like it should be a temporary state, like it looks like, maybe I'm used to like the yellow fade in different places, but like it looks like you open the hey menu and like mentions are yellow, and then like if you opened it again, they wouldn't be yellow. Like it looks a little bit, strikes me a little bit as something that would like not always be there, so
yeah. I actually think I'm thinking now this pill idea might actually be like enough. It's going to be the only object or the only line items that have it. It'll be sort of bold or text doesn't have to be bold, but the text will be reversed. There'll be a pill behind it. And like, in fact, in that case, I would have the at symbol mentioned you as well. So yep. Whoop. Yep. And that's like the nice thing about that is it signals again, like, I mean, you could imagine being new to Basecamp and not knowing you could mention people. And there's something about this. Oh, you can mention people. Okay. Like, because otherwise, like, what is a mention? I mean, now we're getting into some functionality, but all these things are reminders of what's possible. And if you just say mentioned you, like, well, I don't even know how do you mention someone? Well, if it says at mention, you're like, oh, I've used this other thing in the past that had at mentions, and Basecamp can do that too. So there's a little bit of clarity there, which I think is really quite good too. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I'm digging this.
Yeah.
Let's roll. We can get this into production and, see how it feels. But I think we should like roll with this for a day and then like, ship it essentially, unless, I mean, I don't see the downside at this point of this, because there's no real big change that people could be too annoyed by, or we'd be too annoyed by. Yeah.
Cool.
Just because I feel like it'd be it's always helpful because we don't talk about this part very much. Like, I like this. Obviously, it's very straightforward and simple, but it will affect a few things. Like we were doing a mobile app update for this other one, so like so like I think a common dilemma in these kind of situations is like, hey, we're like, this is Monday of week 2 of cooldown. like when do you say, well, this is all fine and dandy, but that's still like, well, let's try it in production for a day, and maybe QA needs to take a quick look, and I think of course all of us, we all want to finish it, and this feels even closer because it's very simple, and gosh, we can do this in an hour and whatever. But like, just from your perspective, Jason, I'm just curious, like, what I mean, like, is it as long as there's not really like unknowns left, or something? Like, when do you eventually feel like we're just going on too long, we just can't keep going on?
Yeah, we're definitely at this point going on too long. So I would say the only thing I'd be wondering, and we can mock this instead, I thought it might be faster to do in production, but perhaps it's not, is just like, let's look at it to make sure it's not annoying. Like, it's not too much
shouting at you.
If it's not, I think we roll with this, and like roll with it. Like, we're done. We don't need to, I mean, we should talk to mobile and make sure that this adjustment, I mean, this is really mostly a style. It's actually purely a style change. That's it. So
maybe they, I don't know, maybe they wouldn't even need to release an update for it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, totally. So we're talking about like one class. Well, basically, we've reduced this to one class, which is cool. I mean, great. If we can get there, great. So sometimes that's how it starts and how it ends. I would do that as long as it's not super, super annoying for some reason. I think we should just roll with it and and ship it tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And whenever you say ship it tomorrow, do you mean like try it out on our account or just ship it?
I mean, can we try this out on our account in an hour? Like, like there's not much. Did we roll back? Where are we on that? We rolled back.
I believe we rolled back
Yeah.
at this point.
Well,
So
I mean, if we could try this on our account, we already, just literally make the style change. Everything stays in the right order. We lose all the sections and simplify. We have to pull some code out. And then let's look at this. I think we should ship it to the public by the end of the day tomorrow, unless there's like some radical reason why we shouldn't. Yeah.
yeah, and Andy, we might be able to pull it off just on a beta if that's
Yeah,
easier.
we can try that too. Yeah, look on a beta real quick.
Just
I mean,
don't have to mess with.
we'll just
Yeah.
add mention
I don't
each
have
other a
to do that.
bunch and, use a sample project and put some other things in there so that we get some spacing and look at and take a look for real. But I think this will be good. So I think whatever these pills look like, Andy, maybe, probably actually not white text on black. It'd probably be too much. So maybe like a light orange, pill or something, and what black text or
Yeah,
whatever.
or we could even just like use this sort of like color that we use elsewhere and just put a little pill around the existing black text that might just highlight it enough.
Probably. Yeah. So I was leaning on you to figure out what you think, is
Yeah,
again,
I'll try a couple different things.
least effective difference. Is kind of where we're at. Cool. Great.
Awesome.
Beautiful. All right.
Thanks
Thanks.
for your help.
I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yep. See ya.